Welcome back, NUIC football fanatics. We're here to bring you our Week 7 matchups. Didn't really have a good week last week. There was two close games last week that I recall. Dakota and EPC, with EPC coming out 14-6 in that one, and Orangeville coming back to beat AFC 30-23, which really put a lot of shock into the area on that score too.
Right. Outside of those two games, it wasn't a great week. We're seeing this week in, week out. The top teams are at the top. The bottom teams are riding the bottom. I mean, we got, River Ridge, Pecatonica, Durand, all at this point are winless. And, you got the three teams at the top who are 9-0, Forreston, Aquin, and Stockton. So there's a big difference in the top and the bottom, and we're seeing that play out week in, week out with who they're playing. I mean, we're talking about big blowouts, but as far as this week, yeah, a couple games. We picked a big win for EPC, but we kind of both knew that game would be closer than what we thought originally, provided Dakota showed up. And then the big win for Orangeville, that could help them, and you never know. Their schedule is very favorable the next 2 weeks. Could put a play it all for Polo at the end, whatever, so that's a big win for Orangeville too. So, it was a great week, but yeah, I really enjoyed that we picked the right game to go to.
Yes, I mean, that EPC Dakota game was by far the best game that I've seen.
We've seen, yeah,
all year this year. There was a lot of intensity, a lot of physicality, some good big plays, some good big stops. And it came down to a ball just getting over the goal line for the game-winning touchdown even.
Right. Game momentum. That was a game that Dakota probably feels they could have won. And had EPC lost, that's a game that they felt they should have won. It was just a great all-around played game, I thought.
Yeah, the environment was great even. I mean, when those two teams get together, it usually is a great atmosphere to be at. Similar to other rivals that you see match up. This takes us to our first matchup, which is going to be in Pecatonica as they host the Dakota Indians. Dakota comes to this game at 3-3 after their 14-6 loss to EPC, while Pecatonica comes in at 0-6 after a 14-0 loss to Galena. As far as Peck, I don't see them having much of a chance in this game. They're 0-6. Their schedule doesn't look very good for them moving forward. I don't see this game being much of a competition either. They have Dakota, Amboy, and Forreston left. I just don't see them getting in the win column this year.
Right, it's just hard for Pecatonica this time. I mean, and we can break down what Dakota's got to do to win, but ultimately, Dakota's a better team. I think it'll be an early night for the starters. Getting out of there, This is coming at the right time for Dakota. You played 2 weeks, one good, one terrible. Luckily the good week followed the terrible rather than coming into this week after their Lena Winslow performance. So, I think this is a good week for Dakota to get back on track and start their push towards the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the way Dakota bounced back last week against EPC after their drubbing that Lena Winslow put on them, they did a really good job sticking with the mentality throughout the entire course of the game. You could really tell that they felt like they were in the game, unlike Lena Winslow where they were dropping their heads and their total demeanor was gone. The mentality that they had last week against EPC, if they have that mentality moving forward, they could knock some teams off in the playoffs, because it's not that they can't compete with these guys. Granted, they do have to be healthy, they have to play smart, but they have to have effort. A favorable schedule for them moving forward should see them getting to 6-3. And keep in mind, their 3 losses are all to state-ranked opponents. It's not like they're losing games that they shouldn't lose. They're losing to some good quality opponents here.
Right, and the projections on the playoff points show that too. We got them picked at 6-3 with 42 points. That's a lot of points. That tells you how tough the competition are. Those 3 losses, Forreston, Lena Winslow, and EPC, they are combined, 17-1?
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks volumes.
It's crazy that people are like, oh my gosh, Dakota's 3-3. They haven't lost nothing yet. Yeah, that game against Lena Winslow, that was a big loss. But
it's over.
I see them going 6-3 here. I don't see a reason why they shouldn't. And being that they would come in at 42 playoff points, that's going to give them the highest amount of playoff points for a 6-3 team. It means they're going to draw either a very low-seeded 8-1 team or a very high-seeded 7-2 team. Granted, they'll go on the road, but I think they're going to get a favorable matchup in the first round.
You feel comfortable with that, and then you move to the second round, providing you win your first round. You're at home more than likely, against a tougher Stockton, Forreston, Ottawa, Marquette, and
Lena Winslow
even. So, and that helps tremendously.
So, no doubt about it, I have Dakota winning big here in Pecatonica this week. All right, our second matchup of the week takes us to West Carroll. They're going to be hosting the East Dubuque Warriors. East Dubuque comes in this game at 4-2 after their 62-0 loss to Forreston. And West Carroll improves to 2-4 after their 42-7 win over Durand. Last week, East Dubuque really got thunderstruck. They really got a wake-up call. We thought they had a wake-up call from Dakota. Forreston blew their doors right off.
Another step up.
Which we kind of anticipate because we know and believe Forreston's better than Dakota. However, this game here, this week for East Dubuque, is definitely a must-win game. Because weeks 8 and 9, they have Lena Winslow and EPC. And I just don't see them matching up in that game with either of those two opponents.
Right. And you don't want to, if you're East Dubuque, you don't want to look at it that way. You take it one game at a time. But the numbers are what the numbers are. And even on the other side of the ball, for West Carroll, this is a must-win. Because you're sitting at 2-4, you drop to 2-5, you're mathematically eliminated. This is a very interesting game. For East Dubuque, it's what we just talked about. West Carroll, you're facing down elimination, but West Carroll's not out of it. If West Carroll can beat East Dubuque, you got Galena at home.
Winnable game.
And then you still have Lena Winslow on the road, but you're at 4-4. You put yourself in a position to control your own destiny. Now, East Dubuque, they lose this game, I feel as though they are not in control of their own destiny.
I would have to say I would agree with that, because East Dubuque losing this game to West Carroll will fall to 4-3, which mathematically they're not eliminated, but looking at who they have next on their schedule, in my mind, they're eliminated. I just don't see, especially after their 3-touchdown loss to Dakota, the pounding they just took from Forreston, I just don't see where they're going to match up with Lena Winslow or EPC, both teams who have beat Dakota already. And I feel we'll give Forreston games in the next couple weeks here.
Right. And we also look at the fact that, these are two teams that are on the brink. This could be an extra 2 teams going into the playoff field, potentially, or 2 teams out. If they both get to 5-4, we both have them projected. East Dubuque at 42 points, more than enough to get in, and West Carroll at 39. You like your chances with 39. If you get East Dubuque in, that bumps that enrollment a little smaller because that's a smaller school that gets in.
Yeah.
So one of those bubble schools like a Fulton or whoever, real close to that line, this could be the difference of whether they jump to 1A or 2A.
Yeah, and you can see that. I mean, we were just talking about it before we came on air about the potential of 9 teams out of the NUIC being able to make the playoffs based on playoff points, 8 of which would be in the 1A class. If those 8 actually make it, which obviously we already have 3 of them that have and a 4th one that's already eligible, then you're looking at 4 more teams coming in. More than likely, you're bumping one of them bubble teams back up into 2A. West Carroll, like you stated, is in must-win mode. With a loss, they're already done.
Right.
East Dubuque probably knows that they have to have this game in order to get to the playoffs. If they don't, they're going to know real quick. I like East Dubuque in this matchup. I looked at common opponents, and really it boils down to West Carroll lost to Amboy by 3 scores, and East Dubuque played with Amboy and ended up beating them by a point. I like East Dubuque in this game.
Right. And, both West Carroll and East Dubuque, I believe, were on the road at Amboy. I mean, that speaks volumes, too. They're both traveling to Amboy, so it's not like it was a flip-flop of a schedule. I mean, that's a common opponent with a common area that you can put together. But, I'm going to take the home team.
You're going with West Carroll. Third game of this week in the Northwest Division is going to take us to Amboy. EPC comes to town with their 6-0 record after their 14-6 win over Dakota last week, while Amboy comes in at a disappointing 2-4 record after they got shut out by Lena Winslow 34-0. Looking at Amboy, we'll start there first. They're in must-win mode moving forward from here on out. One more loss and they are absolutely done. They're going to need a big upset win this week in order just to stay alive for playoff potential. They're not going to match up well with EPC in my opinion. As far as EPC, they proved their mettle last week. Once again, they had a tough matchup with Dakota, and they came out on top 14-6. I really liked Brighton Haverland in that game too. I mean, I really thought that he led that team to victory, both throwing the ball, running the ball, and he played very solid defensive end.
Right, he definitely had a good field presence. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. He was the clear leader of the Wildcats. And, that's something that we knew going into the season with his position change, where he would be in a better position to lead this team. That's no surprise there. I think, once again, the big surprise is that EPC is 6-0. But, outside of their Lena Winslow and Dakota victories, they haven't been tested, but that doesn't change this week either. EPC, in my mind, has been validated. And as far as Amboy, the welcome to the NUIC tour takes another stop in a bad place. I mean, I just don't think that they match up well with EPC, and I have no reason to go against picking EPC.
Yeah, I got EPC winning this one big. All right, we're going to shift gears here to the Upstate Conference. Leading off, we have the Stockton Blackhawks going on the road to visit the Milledgeville Missiles. Stockton comes in this game perfect 6-0 after their 54-6 win over rival Warren last week. And Milledgeville comes in at 4-2 after their tough 13-0 loss last week to Polo. This past week saw Stockton really punch that ticket to the playoffs, once again putting up 54 points. Last week we had stated Warren would get on the scoreboard, but there again the Stockton defense only held them to that one touchdown, and it was late in the game. Stockton with that 54 points now has scored 326 points on the year. Giving up that 6 points, that's their third touchdown that they've given up on the year, so they're only giving up 3 points a game. The only problem I see with Stockton is we see them going 9-0, but you look at their playoff points, 29. That makes them the lowest undefeated team projected as of right now. But even if they were to get a loss, say to an Aquin along the road here, and fall to 8-1, they're still only going to have
30.
30 playoff points.
Yeah, Stockton's schedule, I mean, like we said last week, they can't control that. They can't control what the bottom of their conference looks like. Stockton is guaranteed 29 playoff points just on their upstate division schedule. Where Stockton is really lacking is their crossover with Pecatonica, who's going to go winless. That doesn't help Stockton at all. Stockton could draw a pretty decent, 6-3 team coming out into the playoffs, or a 5-4 team, whatever it may be. But and as far as this game goes, up until last week, I thought Milledgeville, was on the right track and where they needed to be. And last week was a game that we thought Milledgeville had to win because, you know, looking at their schedule going forward, you know, you got Stockton, Dakota. You know, they finish up with Warren, I believe it is. You know,
Yes.
we got them going 5-4 or thereabouts with 39 playoff points. You know, Milledgeville should make the playoffs, but they would have much rather been 6-3, no doubt about it.
Yeah, especially with 39 playoff points, they would have got a better seed at 6-3. Would have drawn most likely an 8-1 team, middle to lower tiered 8-1 team. Could have gave them a little bit better shot. Coming at 5-4, they're gonna have a tough draw. They're gonna get one of the 9-0s out of the 3 that will be left remaining.
It might be Stockton again.
It could be Stockton again. It could be Ottawa, Marquette, or Forreston, which I don't see Milledgeville matching up with any of those 3 teams.
No.
Milledgeville needed to get that win last week. Now they need to do one of 3 things. They either need to pull off an upset at Stockton, an upset against Dakota, or they need to beat Warren in Week 9. As for Stockton, even though they're going to be 9-0 or 8-1, they're going to draw a tough 6-3 or 7-2 team. They're not going to have that easy first round matchup, I don't think. More likely, if they go 9-0, I see them getting a 6-3 team. Right now, I can only see maybe 2 5-4 teams in the playoffs.
Right.
In the North bracket. I don't see 3.
And that's, you know, Stockton can't control that. But as far as this week, you know, I just think that the Blackhawk movement just keeps on going.
Yeah, the Blackhawk runaway train keeps on trucking through Milledgeville. Alright, our second game is going to take us up to the Ville in Orangeville as they host the Durand Bulldogs. Durand comes in at 0-6 after 42-7 loss to West Carroll last week, and Orangeville comes in at 2-4 after their come from behind win over AFC 30-23. That win last week for Orangeville really has Orangeville vying for a potential playoff spot, or at least a opportunity to get to a game that means something there in Week 9 when they have Polo coming to town. If they get to 4-4, which I think they will, that will create quite the matchup there in Week 9, and could see the Broncos land in the playoffs. And I think that they would, because where we at? We would have them at 37 playoff points if they do.
Right.
Get the win over Polo.
Yeah, 37 is going to be real close. You know, we don't know where it's going to be. This is all just a projection. The playoff points as to where we think they're going to be is fairly accurate. It's just where the drop's going to be. But like you said, you know, if Orangeville gets to 4-4, you know, at this point we would probably pick Polo to win that game. But you like to put yourself in that position. I think that's in Orangeville. You know, players are playing for something. You know, after going into last week, you know, AFC wins that game, season's over. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how 1 week can totally change a team's season, and that's exactly what Orangeville and AFC did last week. You know, Orangeville has Durand this week, and then they've got River Ridge. You know, both those teams are 0-6. You know, you like it for Orangeville. I think it's a fun time to be in Orangeville right now.
Yeah, I mean, regardless whether they go 4-5 or 5-4, even if they don't make the playoffs, they're still improving their record over the last 2 seasons.
And they have a lot of talent coming back next year.
So they're really moving the direction of the program in the right direction.
Right.
They got a lot going on, and I really like Orangeville in this game too.
I agree.
All right, our next game takes us to AFC, where they come in at 2-4 after a 30-23 loss to Orangeville, as they host River Ridge, who is 0-6 after their 55-8 loss to Aquin. You look at what River Ridge has done. They're 0-6. They've scored 3 weeks in a row, but they're just not getting enough points on the board. We thought they were a more improved team. I still think they're an improved team over last year. I just can't seem to get it going together offensively. And as far as AFC, they had a really disappointing loss to Orangeville. In my opinion, it was disappointing, as they pretty much had something lined up where they could get into the playoffs. And that's the second time where they've had a game that they probably should have won and didn't. Being that they're 2-4, they're not out of playoffs officially yet. With Polo and Stockton in week 8 and 9, I don't see them getting in.
It doesn't look good for AFC. You know, you look back to that week against Milledgeville where they were up 18-0 and they lost that game. The game against Aquin was there for the taking as well. They didn't get it done, and then last week they kind of lost composure a little bit and lost to Orangeville. You know, those are 3 wins. Not necessarily you can say that they'd be, or 3 losses that you can say would be 3 wins automatically, but, you know, that's how it always looks after you've played the games, you know. AFC really is out of it at this point, and, you know, I like them against River Ridge, but moving forward, you know, you still got Polo and Stockton. It just doesn't look good for them.
Yeah, I have AFC winning that one, too. Our next game takes us to Warren, where they will host Galena. Both teams come in at 1-5. Galena got their first win of the year last year with a 14-0 win over Pecatonica, and Warren had a 54-6 loss to Stockton. For Galena, they're on pace for their worst record since 1975. Last week's game was a good confidence win. Could get them ready for another rivalry game this week. That should get them pumped up. But at 2-7 is where I would see them finishing with a win against Warren here. As far as Warren, it's been a disappointing year. Through their first 5 games, they were in every one of them games. This was the first game last week against Stockton that they actually lost in a blowout fashion, which we kind of expected to happen. This game here with Galena will be a tough game. It should be a good matchup between the 2 teams. And for Warren, they really need to focus on what they did right through the first 5 weeks. Obviously, there's nothing good that they could have done in a 54-6 loss to Stockton. But I like Galena in that game.
Yeah, I like Galena too. I just think that, you know, Warren has played tough, and they played tough, and they played tough, and then they finally got to Stockton, and it was like the floodgates open. You know, you can only play so tough and keep losing, and before you eventually just succumb. Unfortunate for Warren, you know, I had them picked at 7-2, 6-3. You know, really looking for a good first-round match, and, you know, Warren's at 1-5, hosting another Galena team at 1-5 that we earlier in the season thought would compete for the Northwest title, and that's just, to say the least, a very disappointing season for both teams. But I like the gentleman in this game.
All right, this brings us to our Northwest Game of the Week. Features Lena Winslow coming in at 5-1 after their 34-0 win over Amboy last week, heading to Forreston to take on the undefeated Cardinals, who won 62-0 over East Dubuque. Forreston's already in the playoffs, and Lena Winslow is already playoff eligible, but they're definitely in search for that 6th win to become an actual playoff qualifier.
Right. Lena Winslow, if for some odd reason goes 5-4, we still pick them at 38 points. For all intents and purposes, Lena Winslow is already qualified. Or necessarily clinched a spot, in my opinion. You know, this is a good game. You know, this might be one of the top games that we've seen all year. You know, we thought we'd see that. Dakota Forreston would be the top game, but we saw what Forreston did, or what Lena Winslow did to Dakota, excuse me. And Forreston, you know, they just keep on trucking. In a lot of ways, they're like Stockton, only on the other side of the bracket. You know, Forreston's played tougher competition. You know, the scores might not be what Stockton's putting up, but Forreston's playing all-around better competition. Lena Winslow, I like what they're doing. I just think that Forreston is on another level from the entire conference at this point.
Based off of what I've seen this year, I watched a Lena Winslow team in Week 1 lay an absolute egg. I watched them come back in Week 5 and dominate a Dakota team who we thought could compete with them. I still feel that they are closer than a 35-0 win. But I still think Lena has a little bit of an edge over Dakota. I think Lena's gotten better. But yes, Forreston, the way they've controlled the games that they've been in, even you look at their close games against West Carroll where they won 26-6.
Or Dakota.
Or Dakota where they only won 21-0. They pretty much still dominated those games on the offensive and defensive lines. They won those games at the line of scrimmage. Lee Win is going to have problems with Forreston based on conditioning alone. Forreston is by far the best conditioned team in the entire conference, if not the entire state.
Right.
For Forreston, they just need to stay focused. They need to come ready to play, and they need to execute. I don't think that they will have a problem with either, but execution is definitely going to be a big key for them. What they don't want to do is come with the mindset that Forreston has never beat Lena Winslow in Forreston. They cannot let that set in their head. They need to wear Lee Win down on the line. Once they wear them down, then they can get going offensively. And on defense, they need to contain the outside run on defense. If they can do those things, I don't see Forreston not winning this game by at least 2 to 3 scores.
And I would agree with that 100%. I just think that Forreston has a lot going for them. And to me, it's more of what Forreston's going to do in this game, not necessarily what Lena Winslow is going to do. If Forreston plays their game, I don't see a reason why they lose.
Alright, so this takes us to our upstate game of the week. We have the Polo Marcos coming in at 4-2 after their 13-0 win over Milledgeville last week. Going to Conley Field to take on the Aquin Bulldogs, who come in at 6-0 after their 55-8 win over River Ridge. For Polo, they're really looking to get that win number 5 and become playoff eligible. If they were to go 6-3, so to speak, they would have 40 playoff points, so they'd be a pretty high-seeded 6-3 team. But they come into a tough environment at Conley Field. It's always hard to get a win at Aquin. But I feel that they can play with the Bulldogs. As far as Aquin, they've already clinched a playoff spot. Depending on if they go 7-2 or 8-1, they're going to be projected anywhere between 33 to 35 playoff points, depending on where they finish record-wise. They cannot come out overlooking Polo, trying to look forward to Stockton next week in Week 8. I really see this as a trap game for Aquin. To this point, they haven't really played anybody. I mean, they've had a couple close games. Warren gave them a game. Milledgeville gave them a game. But outside of those two, they pretty much stumped everybody else. So this is going to be another test game for them to show if they're prepared. And I don't know. What do you think?
I just think, we look at Aquin and Polo. Polo's 2 losses have come to EPC and Stockton. Aquin, outside of their game against Warren and Milledgeville, Aquin really hasn't been tested that much. Really to me, Kyle has seen Polo play. I haven't seen Polo or Aquin play at this point. So for me, it's kind of a toss-up. I like Aquin at home, but if Aquin were to lose at 7-2, that would give them 34 playoff points. That could be a situation like they had in 2014 where they have a home game, but it's not one you feel comfortable with. So for me, I think Aquin really needs to get to 8-1 this week. And that's the reason I'm taking Aquin, is because they're at home and they have a way of winning at home when you don't always think they would or could.
I have Polo winning this game. I just have a gut instinct that I feel that it is a trap game for Aquin. And I feel that Polo has played a little bit of a tougher schedule. They're more prepared for this game as far as the toughness of their schedule, in my opinion. They've faced the Stocktons, the EPCs. Granted, they got destroyed by them, but they've still played it, so they know what to expect.
Right.
Aquin hasn't even come close to playing that kind of caliber team yet.
Nope.
So I think Polo's 4-2 record's a little deceptive as far as the Upstate Conference is concerned, and I'm picking Polo for the upset in this one. So that's an overview of our Week 7 matchups and what we feel will be the outcomes of those games. Where are you going to head this week, Shane, for coverage?
Well, the goal is to head to Aquin to watch them take on the Polo Marcos this week.
As for myself and Carrie, we're going to be heading back to Forreston again. This will be our third trip to Forreston, which we hope will be a better game than the first two that we've seen down there that we were hoping would have been good games. But we're going to go see them play Lena Winslow. So we're heading down there Friday night. As always, we hope you guys are out at the games. If you do see us, don't feel afraid to stop by and say hi. And always root for the NUIC.